What do you do when you catch your husband with another woman? Lily. Finch didn't scream or cry. She went perfectly, dangerously silent. This is the story of how a quiet housewife orchestrated the most brilliant revenge, turning her husband's entire life into a prison of his own making, while the whole world cheered her on. Disclaimer: this channel features fictional psychological stories created for emotional exploration and storytelling purposes. All characters and events are fictional. The birthday cake on the passenger seat still smelled sweet, like fresh cream. But the smell coming from Thomas's shirt collar was different, a strong jasmine perfume, sharp and wrong. Lily's hands squeezed the steering wheel so tight her knuckles turned white. Her car was parked across the street, still running. She watched through the windshield as her husband, Thomas, walked into a motel with a woman. Not a nice hotel. A cheap, sad-looking motel. The woman had wavy hair and laughed as she took his hand. Thomas looked back at the street quickly, like he was checking for something, then they both disappeared inside. Lily didn't cry. She felt something break inside her chest, but it was quiet. Her heart beat so loud in her ears it was all she could hear. She picked up her phone. Click, click, click. She took pictures of the motel door. Each click sound felt like a tiny cut. She could have run in there. She could have screamed. She could have made a huge scene right in the parking lot. But she looked down at the little cake. The words, "Happy birthday, my love," in chocolate were starting to melt in the warm car, and she remembered something. Thomas wasn't scared of yelling. He was a professor, good with big words and arguments. What Thomas was really scared of was silence, the kind of quiet that asks questions without making a sound. So Lily decided to give herself a birthday present. The gift of deadly quiet. The house was silent when she got home. No TV sounds, no dinner smells. Just her own breathing. She went straight to their bedroom and opened the big closet. She started pulling out Thomas's things. First, a white dress shirt. Nice fabric. She'd bought it for him when he won his big professor award. She remembered that day. He hugged her so tight and said, "Without you, I'm nothing, Lily." Now she held the shirt. That wrong jasmine smell was still on it. Her stomach felt sick. She grabbed both sides of the shirt and pulled as hard as she could. The sound was loud in the quiet room. The shirt tore right down the middle. She threw the pieces into a big black trash bag on the floor, one by. By one, she took his things, ties, socks, belts. Everything went into the bag. She even opened his suitcase and took out what was inside. When she was done, she dragged the heavy bag out of the bedroom. The room looked empty now, with only her things left. She closed the bedroom door and turned the lock. Click. A final sound. She was in the kitchen when she heard the front door open. "Lily? Honey? You home?" Thomas's voice sounded a little high, a little shaky. She heard his footsteps coming into the living room. "Sorry I'm late," he said, his voice getting closer to the kitchen. "Crazy day at the university. You wouldn't believe the meetings." Lily didn't answer. She picked up the plate she'd made and walked out of the kitchen. Thomas stood in the living room holding his briefcase. He looked at her, then at the plate in her hands. "Hey, what's for dinner? Smells good." She walked to the dining table and put the plate down right where he always sat. Clack. The plate hit the wood. "Your dinner," she said. Her voice was flat, empty. Thomas blinked. "Oh, thanks. Where's yours? Aren't you eating?" "I already ate," Lily said. She turned and walked back into the kitchen. Thomas just stood there, looking confused. He looked at the single plate on the big table. He looked toward the kitchen, where Lily was now sitting at the small breakfast table, eating alone from a single bowl. He put his briefcase down slowly. "Lily, are you mad about something?" No answer. Just the quiet sound of her spoon against her bowl. He walked to the kitchen doorway. "So, look, if it's about me being late, I'm sorry. It was just one of those days, you know?" Lily took a sip of water. She didn't look at him. "Come on," Thomas said, his voice getting a little tighter. "Talk to me. What's wrong?" More silence. Then Thomas's face changed. His eyes widened just a little. "Oh my God," he said, the words coming out in a rush. "Today. It's your birthday." Lily finally looked up. She looked right at him. Her face showed nothing. No anger. No sadness. Nothing. "I forgot," Thomas said, running a hand through his hair. "I completely forgot your birthday. The meetings, the stress. I'm so sorry, Lily. I'm such an idiot." He tried to smile, an awkward, guilty smile. "We can still celebrate. Let me take you out, right now, anywhere you want." Lily looked back down at her bowl. She took another bite. "Or tomorrow," Thomas said, his words coming faster. "We'll do something special tomorrow. I'll make it up to you, I promise." Silence. Thomas stood there for a long moment. The quiet in the house felt heavy, like it was pushing down on him. He looked from Lily's calm face to the single plate waiting for him on the dining table. "Okay," he said finally, his voice quiet. "Okay." He walked to the table and sat down. He picked up his fork, but he didn't feel hungry anymore. That night, Thomas slept on the living room sofa, or tried to sleep. The blanket was too thin. The clock on the wall ticked so loud. Tick, tock, tick, tock, like it was counting each second of the terrible quiet. He kept thinking about his day, the motel, the woman. Then coming home and seeing Lily's face, he thought he'd been so careful. He thought his course about meetings would work, but she knew. Somehow, she knew. And she hadn't yelled. She hadn't cried. She'd just gotten quiet. The wind blew outside, whistling through a crack in the window. Thomas pulled the blanket up to his chin. Maybe he was wrong. Maybe she was just really hurt about him forgetting her birthday. Maybe that was all it was. Click. The sound of the bedroom door unlocking. Thomas froze. His heart started beating fast. The door opened just a crack. Lily stood in the doorway, a dark shape against the soft light from her room. Her voice came through the dark, calm and clear. "You forgot to turn off the kitchen light. From now on, remember those little things yourself." Then the door closed. Click. Thomas lay perfectly still in the dark. It wasn't about the light. He knew that now. It was about everything. All the little things he'd forgotten. All the little lies he'd told. The quiet in the house wasn't just quiet anymore. It was a weapon. And Lily had just shown him she knew how to use it. The war had started, and Lily was making all the rules. Lily sat at her computer. The soft tap, tap, tap of the keys, the only sound in the quiet study. On the screen was a simple list. Not a grocery list or a to-do list. This was a list of names. The bakery owner, Mrs. Gable, Thomas's old golf buddy, Frank, his secretary, Margaret, the neighbors who loved to chat over the fence. She called them the town radios, people who couldn't keep a secret if their life depended on it, and right now she needed their broadcasts to be very specific. She picked up her phone and dialed the bakery. It rang twice. Sweet Treats Bakery, this is Carol. Hi, Carol. It's Lily. Lily Finch. Lily's voice was soft, with a little wobble in it she practiced in the mirror. Lily? Honey? How are you? I haven't seen you in a week. I'm okay, Lily said, letting her voice trail off. Just tired. A pause on the other end. Carol's voice dropped to a concerned whisper. Everything all right? Right, dear? How's Thomas? Lily took a quiet breath. The perfect picture of a worried wife. Thank you for asking about him. Really, it's nothing serious. It's just, he's been so forgetful lately. Really forgetful. Forgetful? What do you mean? Little things, Lily sighed. Then big things. Yesterday, he got completely lost coming home from his office, ended up in the neighborhood next to ours. Called me from a gas station, confused. He said all the streets looked wrong. She let the sentence hang, heavy with implication. Oh, my goodness, Carol breathed, her voice full of genuine worry now. That's not like him at all. Has he seen a doctor? We're looking into it, Lily said vaguely. Please, don't mention it to anyone. He'd be so embarrassed. You know how proud he is. Of course, dear. My lips are sealed. Lily knew Carol's lips were about as sealed as a torn paper bag. By noon, half the neighborhood would know in confidence that poor Professor Finch was having memory problems. Lily hung up the phone. The first seed was planted. Carol was the best neighborhood loudspeaker money couldn't buy. And Lily needed that loudspeaker to play the right tune. But this was just the opening act. Thomas would soon learn that some whispers were more dangerous than others. 3 days later, Thomas met his friends for their usual Thursday coffee. The cafe was noisy, with the clatter of cups and the low murmur of conversations. But at their table by the window, the usual jokes felt flat. Frank, his oldest friend, squinted at him over his espresso. You look like hell, Tommy. You sleeping? Thomas forced a laugh. Just busy. The usual. Another friend, David, patted his shoulder. A little too hard. Seriously, man, you need a break. Or maybe a doctor. I know a good neurologist. Thomas's smile froze. A neurologist? What for? David shrugged, but his eyes were careful. Just thinking out loud. You seem distracted, more than usual. Then Robert, the quietest of the group, cleared his throat. Lily stopped by my wife's book club last week, he said, not meeting Thomas's eyes. She was asking about books. For herself, she said. About age-related memory issues. She bought one. Said she wanted to understand better. The air went out of the room. The friendly chatter at the table died. Thomas felt his face grow hot, a prickly heat climbing up his neck. All his friends were looking at him with a new expression. It wasn't laughter anymore. It was pity and curiosity. He left the cafe early, his coffee untouched. In his car, he gripped the steering wheel until his hands hurt. Then he called Lily. The phone rang once, twice. She picked up. "Hello? What are you doing?" Thomas's voice was tight, a wire about to snap. "Making lunch." "Why?" Lily's voice was calm. Too calm. Are you telling people things about me?" he demanded. "Talking about me?" A soft, light sound came through the phone. Was that a laugh? "Who told you that?" she asked, her voice innocent. "Or is it just, maybe you're starting to feel like something's wrong yourself?" The question hung in the air, poisonous. It wasn't an accusation. It was a suggestion. And it was worse. "I feel fine," Thomas snapped. "Good," Lily said, her voice sweet. "Then you have nothing to worry about. See you for dinner." The line went dead. Thomas stormed into the house, ready to confront her. But the house was empty. Silent. On the living room coffee table, next to her reading glasses, was a single piece of paper. It was covered in Lily's neat handwriting, but parts of it were scribbled over, frantic. His eyes scanned it. Grocery lists, phone numbers, and then words that jumped out at him. Paranoid ideation. Circled. Risk of harm. Underlined twice. Visual hallucinations. With a big question mark next to it. His breath caught. His hand, reaching for the paper, trembled slightly. He looked toward her closed study door. He'd never snooped before. But now, a cold fear propelled him. He turned the knob. It was unlocked. Inside, her desk was tidy, except for one stack of books. He recognized them. They were from her trip to the bookstore. He picked up the top one. The Aging Brain, Understanding Cognitive Decline. He flipped it open. The margins were filled with notes in Lily's hand. Does this sound familiar? Next to a paragraph about confusion. Check for this symptom. Beside a list about personality changes. Book after book. Coping with dementia. When a loved one forgets. All annotated. All studied. His heart started to pound. A hard, fast rhythm in his ears. One book slipped from his shaking hands and hit the floor with a heavy thump. This wasn't worry. This was research. That night, long after the house had fallen into its new, heavy silence, Thomas stood in the bathroom. The door was locked. He stared at his own reflection in the big mirror. The man looking back seemed older, tired. Shadows under his eyes. "Are you sick?" he whispered to the mirror. The sound was small in the tiled room. "Or are you just guilty?" Drip, drip. The faucet leaked, each drop echoing. He leaned closer, searching his own eyes. Was his gaze unfocused? Was there a confusion there he hadn't noticed before? He thought about getting lost last week. He had taken a wrong turn, but it was just one wrong turn, wasn't it? He was so lost in the twisted maze of his own thoughts that he didn't hear the soft click at the bathroom door. Suddenly, the bathroom light blinked off. Darkness, total and complete, Thomas gasped. In the black mirror, his own pale face was a ghostly, twisted shape. For a terrifying second, he didn't recognize himself. A short, sharp cry escaped his lips. Then, a bright, blinding beam of light hit the mirror from behind him. Lily stood in the doorway, a heavy flashlight in her hand. The light illuminated Thomas's terrified reflection perfectly, like a specimen on a slide. Her own face was in shadow behind the beam. Her voice was soft, gentle, and it made the hairs on his neck stand up. "What do you see in there, Thomas? Tell me what you see." He couldn't speak. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat of pure fear. He stared at his own wide, frightened eyes in the mirror, trapped in her light. Lily didn't wait for an answer. She lowered the flashlight, turned, and her soft footsteps faded down the hall. She left him there, alone in the dark with the dripping faucet. The after-image of his own terrified face burned into his vision, and a question that now echoed inside his own skull, over and over. What did he see? The only sounds in the study were the loud tick-tock of the old wall clock and the wind whistling outside the window. Lily sat perfectly still in front of her computer. The screen glowed, showing a detailed file for a man named Dr. Alastair Raymond. It wasn't a real file. She had created it herself. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. Tap, tap, tap. She opened another window, checking the fake medical license number against a database she'd also faked. She flipped through a heavy textbook on psychiatry next to her, the pages rustling softly. She needed the big words to sound right. 30 years ago, fresh out of college, Lily had been an investigative journalism major. She'd learned how to dig, how to verify, how to build a story from nothing but questions. She'd never used it for a big career. She'd used it to build a life with Thomas. Now, she was using it to take that life apart. "Check every detail," she whispered to the quiet room. The fake degree. The fake hospital he worked at. The fake patient testimonials. Not a single thing can be wrong. It was a dangerous game. If Thomas asked one deep question about medicine, or decided to call the clinic to double-check, the whole play would fall apart. But Lily knew his weakness, his pride, his terror of looking stupid, especially in front of a professional. He wouldn't dare question a doctor's authority. He would sit there and absorb every word like a guilty sponge. 2 days later, Thomas sat in a leather armchair that was too soft. The office of Dr. Raymond was all dark wood and quiet calm. The doctor himself looked exactly like his photo. Kind eyes, silver hair, a soothing voice. "So, Thomas," Dr. Raymond said, looking over his glasses at a notepad, "Lily tells me you've been having some episodes. Moments of confusion." "It's nothing serious," Thomas said quickly, shifting in the chair. It creaked. "Just stress. Work." The doctor made a note. "Tell me, do you have dreams, perhaps of being chased, or a more unsettling feeling, like the people around you, the people you love, aren't really themselves?" Thomas froze. The air in the room felt thin. How could he know? Just last night, watching Lily move silently around the kitchen, he'd had that exact, chilling thought. She looked like Lily, but it felt like watching a stranger wearing her skin. How did you know that?" Thomas's voice was a dry whisper. "Sometimes, when I look at Lily, it feels like I'm looking at someone else." Dr. Raymond nodded slowly, as if a difficult puzzle piece had just clicked into place. He put down his pen. "That," he said gently, "is a classic symptom. It's called Capgras syndrome, a delusion where a person believes a loved one has been replaced by an imposter. The word delusion hung in the air, ugly and final. Later, in the car, Lily held a small leather-bound notebook. She opened it to a page marked with a ribbon. Her voice was gentle, brimming with painful care. The doctor said we should keep a record to help. She pointed to an entry. See, here, March 15th. You called me Mom. You said you wanted to go home. Thomas stared at the neat handwriting. His blood ran cold. What? No, I never said that. My mother has been dead for 10 years. Lily looked up at him. Her eyes were full of a hurt so deep it looked real. A single tear traced a path down her cheek. You don't remember, she said, her voice trembling beautifully. That morning you were so confused. You cried like a little boy, saying you missed your mom. She reached out as if to touch his arm, then pulled back as if burned by his denial. Thomas, don't you remember anything? The sheer, heartbreaking conviction in her voice was a weapon. For a dizzying second, Thomas didn't doubt her. He doubted himself. Had he? Could he have forgotten something so terrible? The drive home was silent. Thomas stared out the window, his mind a storm of fear. The doctor's words, Lily's tear-streaked face, the impossible entry in the notebook. They swirled together into one awful truth. Maybe, he mumbled, not even realizing he'd spoken aloud. Maybe I really do have a problem. Lily said nothing. She just watched the road, her face a mask of quiet concern. When they got home, Thomas went straight to the living room and poured himself a drink, his hands unsteady. Lily went upstairs. She didn't go to their bedroom. She walked past it to the end of the hall, to a small, locked closet used for linens. From her pocket, she took a small, cold metal key. It slid into the lock with a smooth click. She opened the door, not to shelves of towels, but to a deep, hidden storage space. Inside were not linens, but notebooks, dozens of them. Neat rows of identical leather-bound journals like archives in a library. She pulled out the first one. 2008, she flipped it open. Her own handwriting, precise and dense, filled every page. May 12th, 2008. Thomas lied about the failed investment. Told friends it doubled. Loss was $15,000. Source, bank statement I found crumpled in his briefcase. Another, from 2015. September. Flirting with the new young research assistant, Clara. Lingering touches, late work sessions. He stopped when Clara got engaged. He's a coward at heart. Another. Primary fear confirmed. Being ridiculed by academic peers. Would do anything to protect his reputation. Page after page. Year after year. A 20-year log of every secret, every lie, every small and large betrayal. A map of Thomas's soul, drawn in secret ink. She hadn't been just a wife for 2 decades. She had been a detective, a historian of his flaws. She knew the man in the living room better than he knew himself. She knew what he wanted, what he feared, what he was ashamed of. And now, finally, it was time to use the collection. Lily ran her fingers over the spines of the notebooks. A curator with her most precious artifacts. Her face, reflected in the dark glass of a framed picture on the wall, showed no sadness now. Only a cold, focused calm. She closed the closet door. The heavy thud echoed in the empty hallway. The metal lock turned with a final, decisive clunk. Downstairs, Thomas jumped at the sound, spilling his drink. The house was quiet again. But the silence now felt different. It felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for the next move in a game only one of them knew they were playing. The party was everything their social world loved. Soft jazz from a live band, the gentle clink of crystal glasses, the warm murmur of expensive laughter. For Lily, it was a stage. For Thomas, it felt like a cage. He stood by the grand piano, a glass of something golden in his hand he hadn't tasted. He looked tired. His suit, usually perfect, seemed to hang a little loose. Across the room, Lily was a sunbeam in a sea of gray. She wore a simple blue dress and a bright smile. A small group of friends orbiting her with concerned expressions. He caught snippets of the conversations swirling around him, sharp as broken glass. Poor Thomas. He looks absolutely drained. Lily is so strong, managing everything. I heard it's quite advanced, the memory issues. Thomas's grip tightened on his glass. Every word was a tiny pinprick. He watched as a woman patted Lily's arm. Lily nodded, her face a perfect picture of brave sadness. "Thank you for your concern," she said, her voice carrying just enough to reach him. "He's trying so hard. We both are." Lily, watching Thomas from the corner of her eye, thought about the tools at her disposal. Poison? Too crude, too much evidence. She had something far more powerful, the fear she had already planted deep in his mind. A seed of doubt about his own sanity. Tonight wasn't about adding poison. It was just about watering that seed at the perfect moment. Thomas lifted his glass to his lips, desperate for the burn of the whiskey to drown out the whispers. Before it could touch his mouth, Lily was at his side. She slipped her arm through his, a loving wife's gesture. She leaned in, her lips close to his ear, her voice a confidential, worried whisper only he could hear. "Darling, please, not that," she breathed, her eyes wide with faux concern. "Remember what Dr. Raymond said? Alcohol can trigger the hallucinations. You don't want to start seeing things in your glass again, like last time." Thomas froze. The glass was halfway to his mouth. He stared into the amber liquid. The smooth jazz from the band seemed to warp for a second, the notes twisting into something discordant and strange in his head. Had he seen something before? Snakes? Was that a memory or a nightmare? His breath hitched. He didn't see anything now. But what if he took a sip and they appeared? Slowly, as if the glass were suddenly toxic, he lowered it back to the table. His face had gone pale. He couldn't pull his eyes away from the drink. Just then, an old colleague, James, approached with a broad smile. "Tommy, haven't seen you in ages." Before Thomas could form a hello, Lily turned her brilliant public smile on James. Her voice was just a touch too loud, too cheerful for the quiet conversation they'd been having. "Oh, James, Thomas talks about you all the time. He always says you're the one friend who never made fun of him about his condition." James's friendly smile faltered. His brow furrowed in genuine confusion. "Condition? What condition? Thomas, are you sick?" To Thomas, the confusion on James's face looked like mockery, a cruel, knowing joke. The whispers, the pitying looks, Lily's warning, it all boiled over into a red-hot rage. He pointed a shaking finger at his old friend. "You, Thomas's voice was too loud, scraping across the polite murmur of the party. "You're in on it, too. You're standing with them. You think I'm crazy." The music stopped. 100 conversations died mid-sentence. Every head in the room turned. The silence was absolute and utterly condemning. Under the weight of all those staring eyes, curious, horrified, fascinated, something in Thomas snapped. The pressure of weeks, the gnawing fear, the public humiliation exploded. "I'm not crazy," he roared, his voice breaking. Spittle flew from his lips. "It's her. It's all Lily. She's poisoning me." He turned, a wild animal trapped in a spotlight, and with a sweep of his arm, he sent the small table next to him crashing over. Glasses and plates exploded on the marble floor in a spectacular, shocking cacophony of shattering crystal. Women screamed. In the terrifying silence that followed the crash, Lily moved. She didn't flinch away from the raging man. She launched herself at him. She wrapped her arms around his torso from behind, pinning his arms to his sides in a show of desperate strength. She buried her face against his back, and her body was racked with loud, perfect sobs. "Thomas, my love, no. Please, calm down. I'm here. It's me," she cried, her voice breaking with what sounded like heartbreak and fear. The picture was complete. The deranged, violent husband. The brave, sacrificing wife trying to restrain him. At that exact moment, a woman appeared in the arched doorway of the ballroom. Elena. She was late, dressed for a party. The scene she walked into was not a party. She saw Thomas Finch, the distinguished professor, the man of careful words, red-faced, screaming drool at the corner of his mouth, being physically held back by his weeping wife. He looked like a beast, a madman. Lily, still holding the thrashing Thomas, lifted her head. Her eyes, over Thomas's shoulder, found Elena's across the ruined room. There were no more tears in that look, no sadness, just a cold, clear Arctic stare that held a single silent message. "Look, this is the man you chose. This is what he really is." Elena's face went blank with shock, then crumpled into revulsion. She didn't take another step into the room. She turned on her heel and vanished back into the hallway, her high heels clicking a frantic retreat on the polished floor. In the distance, faint but growing louder, came the unmistakable wail of an ambulance siren. Someone had called. Lily rested her cheek against Thomas's heaving back, her sobs subsiding into quiet shudders. The seed of fear had been watered with public shame, nourished by manipulated rage. Sometimes you don't need a weapon. You just have to push a man to the very edge of his own terror and watch him jump. The phone buzzed on the kitchen counter with an unknown number. Lily picked it up on the third ring, her face calm. She tapped a small button on the screen to record the call. A soft, nearly silent click confirmed it was running. A woman's voice came through, shaky but trying to sound tough. "Is this Mrs. Lily? Lily Finch?" "Yes," Lily said, her voice neutral. "This is Elena." A pause, a nervous breath. I know everything about you and Thomas. I saw him at the party. Is he really sick like that?" Lily said nothing. She let the silence stretch, a heavy weight on the other end of the line. Elena's voice grew more frantic. "You have to give me money. A lot of it. For For my silence. If you don't, I'll tell everyone. I'll tell them you're keeping him locked up, that you're making him seem crazy. Lily almost smiled. Elena thought she was the one making a threat, but the terrified tremor in her voice gave her away. She wasn't a predator. She was a scared rabbit who'd stumbled into a snare. A timid prey animal. All it needed was one good scare to send it running blindly back into the woods. "All right," Lily said, her voice cool and businesslike. "We should talk, in person. The Rosewood Cafe. Tomorrow, 3 o'clock. Come alone." She hung up before Elena could argue. The Rosewood Cafe was quiet on a Tuesday afternoon. Elena arrived 5 minutes early, her face pale under a layer of makeup she'd applied too thickly. She scanned the nearly empty tables, looking for Lily. Her eyes landed on the only other person there, a serious-looking man in a crisp, dark suit, sitting alone at a corner booth. He had a plastic ID badge clipped to his lapel. She hesitated, then walked over. "Excuse me, I'm looking for—" "Elena?" the man interrupted, his voice low and official. He gestured to the seat across from him. "Please sit." Confused, Elena slid into the booth. "Who are you? Where's Lily?" "My name is Mr. Daniels," he said, not offering a handshake. He tapped his ID badge. It read, Metro Social Services, Community Mental Health and Safety Unit. "Mrs. Finch provided us with your information. We understand you've had recent, close contact with the individual in question. Thomas Finch." Elena's mouth went dry. What? No, I just wanted to talk to his wife. We're conducting an assessment," Mr. Daniels cut in, opening a slim, expensive-looking leather portfolio. "For community safety, given Mr. Finch's recent, very public episode, and his diagnosed condition, we need to know if he exhibited any violent or threatening behavior towards you during your interactions." Elena felt the blood drain from her face. "Violent? No, he never." Are you certain?" Mr. Daniels pressed, his eyes sharp. "Even a raised voice, an implied threat? We have to document everything. It helps us determine if involuntary commitment is necessary. To protect people. To protect you." He pulled a thick file from his portfolio and laid it on the table. He opened it. On top was a blown-up, grainy photo. It was Thomas from the party, his face contorted in a scream, eyes wild. It was a horrifying image. Beneath it were official-looking documents with dense blocks of text. Mr. Daniels pointed a clean fingernail to a line highlighted in yellow. "It says here he has a documented history of making threats against close personal relations," he said gravely. He looked at Elena, his gaze intent. "You're very lucky nothing happened to you. But, given the escalation, we strongly advise you to distance yourself. Permanently." He reached into his inner suit pocket and pulled out a plain, white envelope. It was disappointingly thin. He slid it across the table. "This is a discretionary fund for relocation assistance to help you make a fresh start somewhere else, for your own safety. We strongly recommend you take it and go, soon." Elena stared at the envelope. It didn't look like it held much money at all. It looked like a bribe to disappear. Her mind raced. Involuntary commitment, violent history, community safety. The photo of Thomas's twisted face burned in her vision. This wasn't about blackmail money anymore. This was about getting away from a dangerous man who had government people watching him. She pushed back from the table so fast the bench screeched. I don't know anything. I don't want anything. I have to go." She didn't look back. She fled the cafe, the bell on the door jingling frantically behind her. The moment the door swung shut, the expression on Mr. Daniels's face changed. The grim official melted away. He smirked, reached up, and unclipped the fake ID badge from his lapel, tossing it onto the table. He looked directly up at a small dark dome in the corner of the ceiling, a security camera, and gave a thumbs up. A moment later, a side door marked "Private" opened, and Lily stepped out. She walked over to the booth, her movements smooth and unhurried. "Nicely done, Marcus," she said, her voice flat. The man, Marcus, grinned. She was practically shaking. Easy mark. He gathered his things, gave Lily a nod, and left through the back. Lily sat down in the seat Elena had just vacated. She picked up the thin envelope, opened it, and counted the bills inside. A mere $500. She tucked it into her purse. Then she picked up the thick, terrifying case file. She opened it. The first page was the shocking photo of Thomas. The next few pages had official-looking headers and the serious diagnosis. Paranoid personality disorder with violent ideation. She flipped past them. The rest of the file, from page 5 onward, was completely, utterly blank. Just reams of pristine white paper. The history and reports were nothing but a convincing cover and a few forged sheets on top. Lily took the thick stack of blank pages and, with calm, deliberate hands, began to tear them in half. Then in half again. The sound of ripping paper was soft and final in the empty cafe. She let the pieces fall into a neat pile on the table. A greedy woman, but a coward. Perfect. Now, Thomas, my love, Lily thought, brushing the last paper shred from her hands. Now you are truly alone. The rain tapped a steady, lonely rhythm against the window. In the living room, the only other sound was the soft clink of a glass bottle against the rim of a tumbler. Thomas was drinking, but carefully. He poured another finger of whiskey, his hand trembling slightly. He was maybe 70% of the way to drunk. Enough to dull the edges of his humiliation, but not enough to blur his suspicion. That was the dangerous zone he was in, drowning but still trying to keep his head above the dark water. "She's planning something," he mumbled to the empty room, his voice thick. "Has to be. Have to stay sharp." But the words slurred just a little. He took another sip, the burn doing nothing to warm the cold fear in his gut. Lily watched him from the hallway, a silent shadow. She knew his state exactly. Too drunk, and any signature he gave could be challenged in court later. Too sober, and he'd never agree to anything. So she wouldn't rely on alcohol. She would rely on something far more sobering. Cold, hard, rational pressure. She waited until he had set the glass down, his eyes bleary but still alert. Then she walked into the light. "Thomas," she said, her voice not unkind, just tired, resigned. "We need to talk about the money." He squinted at her. "What money?" Lily placed a simple manila folder on the coffee table between them. She didn't open it yet. "Our money. The joint account. The investments you told me about." She opened the folder. Inside weren't fake wills or medical papers. They were copies. A photocopy of a motel receipt from months ago, the date circled. Then, credit card statements. Charge after charge. A fancy florist, a boutique jewelry store, a five-star restaurant downtown. Dates spanning the last year. She laid them out one by one, like a prosecutor presenting evidence. "I'm past the affair, Thomas," Lily said, her voice hollow with a sadness that seemed real. "That pain is old now. But this?" She tapped the receipts. "This is new. You told me we lost almost $20,000 on a bad investment. You said it was a total loss." Thomas stared at the papers, his drunken haze burning away under a sudden wave of icy clarity. "This," Lily continued, her finger tracing a line for an expensive necklace, "is where that lost investment went. You used our money. Money I saved, penny by penny, for our future. You used it on her. That's not an affair, Thomas. That's financial fraud. Against your own wife." The sound of the rain was drowned out by the pounding of Thomas's own heart. The evidence was undeniable. The dates matched. The amounts added up to almost double what he'd claimed to lose. Lily let the silence hang, letting the weight of the receipts crush him. Then she presented the choice. Her voice was calm, logical, a business proposition. "You have two options now," she said, opening her laptop. Option 1. I take all of this, the fraud evidence, plus the official psychiatric evaluations you've had, and the video from the Abbott's party, to a divorce lawyer. With your documented instability and this clear theft of marital assets, you'd lose at least 70% of everything. Probably more. And your reputation at the university? Gone. She clicked a key on her laptop. The screen lit up, facing him. It was the video. There he was, red-faced, screaming, smashing the table. It was even worse than he remembered. A monster in a tuxedo. Option 2, she said, closing the laptop slowly. You voluntarily sign over 60% of your shares in the consulting firm and the deed to the beach house, to me, as a settlement for the funds you misappropriated. You keep the rest, the main house, your salary, your pension, and, in return, I sign a non-disclosure agreement. I never speak a word about your condition to anyone, ever. Thomas's mind, fogged with alcohol and fear, was forced into a brutal, clear calculation. He looked from the damning receipts to the closed laptop containing his public ruin. This wasn't a trap set in a shadowy room. This was a spreadsheet of his own crimes. 60%. It was a vicious cut, deep enough to cripple him financially for years. But it wasn't everything. It was calculated to hurt, but not to make him so desperate he'd choose a scorched earth court battle. She was leaving him just enough to survive on, making the rational choice obvious. He hated her with a purity that cleared the last of the whiskey from his brain. "You win," he spat, the words dripping with venom. "Fine. But not on your terms alone." A spark of his old manipulative self flickered. "You'll write a binding agreement. You will never, under any circumstances, publicly disclose any information about my mental health. You sign that first." And he hesitated, a last pathetic gambit. "And you arrange for me to see Elena one last time. I need to hear it from her." Lily almost smiled. A small, faint curl of her lips. "Of course. The NDA. I'll draft right now. As for Elena, she picked up her phone, tapped the screen a few times, and turned it to face him. It was a screenshot of a bank transfer. $10,000, sent from Lily's account to an Elena Rodriguez. The description read, "For exclusive digital archive. She sold me all your text messages," Lily said softly. "Every picture, every silly little I miss you note, for $10,000. She said it was more than you ever spent on her at once." Lily put the phone away. "Her flight to Madrid left 3 hours ago." Thomas's face went slack, then ashen. All the fight drained out of him, leaving behind a hollow shell. He had lost. Not just to Lily. He had lost the money, the respect, and now, with a final transactional cruelty, the illusion of the affair itself. The woman he'd risked everything for had put a price tag on their secret and cashed it in. His hand, when he reached for the pen Lily offered, was steady now. Steady with defeat. He scrawled his signature on the transfer documents, the pen scratching angrily against the paper. Lily watched the ink dry. A signature given under pressure, yes. But the pressure wasn't from a lie. It was from the unbearable weight of his own truth. The feeling of justice, she thought, collecting the signed papers. It was deeply, profoundly satisfying. In the suffocating quiet of the study he now used as a bedroom, Thomas clutched his phone like a lifeline. His last hope had a name. David. An old friend from law school, now a successful attorney. If anyone could see through Lily's web, it would be David. His voice was a frantic, hushed whisper in the dark. "David, you have to listen to me. She's a devil. She's gaslighting me. She's stolen from me. She's making everyone think I'm insane. I need you. I need to sue her for fraud, for false imprisonment." There was a long pause on the other end. Not the immediate, outraged agreement Thomas needed. "Thomas, that's a serious accusation. Do you have any proof? Anything concrete?" "Proof? She's erased it all. She's too clever. But you can find it, David. You have to help me. You're my last chance." Another hesitation. A lawyer's cautious pause. "I'll look into it, Thomas, but tread carefully." Thomas hung up, a sliver of desperate hope piercing his despair. David was smart. David was connected. David would be his savior. He didn't know that David had a secret. A big, ugly, career-ending secret. And Lily had known about it for years. She was more than ready to use it. 2 days later, David arrived at the house, his expression professionally neutral. Lily greeted him in the living room, not as a potential adversary, but as a hostess. She didn't offer small talk. She simply placed a single, old-fashioned photograph on the coffee table between them. It showed a younger David, laughing, his arm around a pretty woman with dark hair on a sun-drenched resort balcony. It was not his wife. David's professional mask cracked. The color drained from his face. "Your wife and the kids are settled in Connecticut, aren't they?" Lily said, her voice soft, almost conversational. "I hope they're doing well. Do they know about her?" She tapped the photograph lightly. "Or about the $50,000 you borrowed from the firm's discretionary fund last quarter? The one that still hasn't been repaid?" David didn't speak. He just stared at the photo, his breathing shallow. "I have more," Lily said gently. "Bank records, hotel confirmations. It's quite a file. I've had it for a while. since before Thomas's troubles began. She let the silence stretch, letting David imagine the collapse of his marriage, his career, his life. Then she offered the deal. Here is my proposal. You convince Thomas to drop any thought of legal action. You tell him it's hopeless. You advise him, as his friend and lawyer, that for his own health and safety, he should retire quietly. Agree to the arrangements I've made for him. In return, this file, she gestured to the imaginary dossier, disappears forever. And for your time and discretion, I will transfer a very generous consulting fee to an account of your choosing. David closed his eyes. When he opened them, he looked 10 years older. He gave a single, defeated nod. Good, Lily said. She slid a brand-new, unregistered cell phone across the table to him. Call him, now. I'd like to hear you convince him. With trembling hands, David picked up the phone and dialed Thomas's number. It rang twice. David, did you find something? Thomas's voice was eager, desperate. David took a shaky breath, his eyes locked on Lily's calm gaze. Thomas, I've reviewed the preliminary situation, looked at everything you mentioned. And you see it, right? You see what she's doing? Thomas, David said, his voice firming into a false, lawyerly certainty. Lily is completely in the right. The financial transfers, the medical recommendations, it's all for your own good. You're not well, my friend. You need to listen to your wife for your health. You should go along with her plan. The silence on the other end of the line was total. Then came a broken, disbelieving sound, halfway between a sob and a laugh, before the line went dead. That night, the house was a tomb. Around 2 a.m., a shadow moved through the darkness. Thomas, unshaven, eyes wild with a final, frantic energy, picked the simple lock on Lily's home office. He had to find something, anything. A file, a recording, a secret notebook, proof that this was all a lie. He didn't turn on the light. He used the faint glow from the hallway. He yanked drawers open, his movements jerky and violent. Papers flew. He swept books off shelves. A small ceramic vase she kept on the desk crashed to the floor, shattering. He didn't care. "Where is it?" he growled into the darkness, tearing at the lining of her desk. "You witch! Where did you hide it all?" Suddenly, the overhead light blazed on. Thomas froze, squinting in the painful brightness. Lily stood in the doorway. She wasn't in pajamas. She was dressed as if she'd been waiting. In her hand, held steady and level, was her smartphone, its screen pointed directly at him. The little red recording light was on. She panned the phone slowly, capturing the scene. The ransacked room, the scattered papers, the shattered vase, and Thomas himself, wild-eyed and breathing heavily in the center of the destruction. "You see, Thomas," Lily said, her voice calm, clear, and perfectly audible for the recording. "This is what unstable looks like. Breaking and entering, destruction of property, verbal threats. This is the man everyone is worried about. This is the man who is a danger to himself and others." The reality of what he had just done crashed down on Thomas with physical force. He hadn't found proof. He was the proof. He had walked into her trap and given her the final, perfect piece of evidence she needed. All the fight left him. His legs buckled. He sank to his knees on the carpet amidst the wreckage of the office, his body convulsing with great, heaving sobs. He cried like a child, utterly broken. Lily lowered the phone, stopping the recording. She took a few quiet steps forward until she stood over him, looking down at the wreck of the man she had once loved. Her voice, when it came, was quiet and final, echoing in the ruined room. "Now," she said, "the game is over." The footsteps echoed in the high-ceilinged hallway of the courthouse, a solemn sound that promised finality. In a last, desperate move, Thomas had scraped together his remaining funds to hire not just any lawyer, but Kyle, the Black Dragon in certain legal circles. He was known not for passion or morality, but for a cold, surgical ability to dissect complicated divorces. He didn't care who his client was, he cared about winning. Lily felt the first real chill of the entire campaign when she met him in a pretrial conference. He was a man in his 50s with sharp eyes that missed nothing. He shook her hand, his grip dry and brief. "Miss Finch," he said, his voice neutral, almost bored. "I have no interest in the morality play here. My job is facts. And I have to say, your collection of psychiatric evidence is remarkably cohesive. It reads like a narrative, a very compelling one." He was a real obstacle, a professional skeptic. He could pick apart the doctor's reports, challenge the videos as taken out of context. For the first time in months, Lily felt a thread of genuine anxiety. She couldn't rely on the manufactured story anymore. She needed something undeniable, a dark truth that Thomas himself could not refute. The day before the final hearing, Lily requested a private meeting with Kyle. She didn't bring arguments or pleas. She brought a small, unmarked USB drive. "You're looking for what's real, Mr. Kale," she said, sliding it across the table. "This is." He said nothing. He plugged it into his laptop, put on headphones, and pressed play. The audio was slightly muffled, the acoustics of a bar or a private club. The voices were younger. One was unmistakably Thomas's, his words slurred with drink and arrogance. "Lily? Please. She's a stepping stone. Her family name opened every door at the university. That's why I married her. A smart investment." A friend's voice, laughing. "Come on, Tommy, you love her." A dismissive snort from Thomas. "Love? She's a reliable shadow, a comfortable piece of furniture. You wait. Once my position is completely secure, I'll trade up. Find some young, fresh arm candy. A woman over 40. She's already obsolete." The sound of glasses clinking. More crude, derisive laughter. Kaios listened, his expression not changing. But something shifted behind his eyes. The cold calculation remained, but its target had moved. He removed the headphones and looked at Lily. "This is 10 years old," he stated. "Yeah," she said. "I recorded it on an old digital voice memo pen, a gift from him, ironically. I found it recently, cleaning out storage. It proves premeditated, long-term emotional fraud and intent to exploit. Not a momentary affair, a decade-long lie." Kyle ejected the drive and handed it back to her. He didn't say another word. The courtroom felt different the next day. Thomas sat beside Kyle, a fragile hope in his eyes. His dragon was here to breathe fire on his behalf. But when Kyle stood, he didn't attack Lily's psychiatric evidence. He didn't mention the party video or de Raymond. He changed the entire battlefield. "Your Honor," Kyle began, his voice as cool and sharp as a scalpel. "This case is not about mental competency. It is about a profound, calculated betrayal of trust and assets spanning a decade." he submitted evidence to the court. First, an edited transcript of the audio recording, highlighting Thomas's stated intent to use Lily for social advancement and discard her. Then, the paper trail of money, transfers to Elena, large cash withdrawals labeled falsely as investments. Finally, a sworn affidavit from a bank manager Lily had quietly persuaded to come forward, confirming the unusual pattern of withdrawals and Thomas's false explanations. The plaintiff, Kyle argued, gesturing not to Thomas but to Lily, was the victim of a long con, a financial and emotional Ponzi scheme. The psychological distress she suffered, which may have led to extreme but understandable attempts to protect herself, is a direct and foreseeable consequence of the defendant's actions. We submit that the most just resolution is a significant asset redistribution to the plaintiff as compensatory damages. Thomas stared at his lawyer, his mouth agape. This wasn't a defense. This was a brutal, efficient prosecution. From his own corner, the verdict, when it came, was swift. The judge, influenced by the cold, factual presentation of Thomas's own deceit, ruled overwhelmingly in Lily's favor. 70% of the marital assets. Full control of the remaining finances. The gavel came down with a decisive wooden crack. After the courtroom emptied, a shell-shocked Thomas found Kyle packing his briefcase in the hall. What was that?" Thomas choked out. "You were supposed to defend me." Kyle looked at him, his expression one of pure, dispassionate assessment. "I was paid to protect your best interests. After reviewing all evidence, particularly that recording, I determined your best interest was to admit a fault and sacrifice assets to retain a shred of personal dignity. Mrs. Finch was offering you a path out. I simply optimized the route for minimal total loss." He snapped his briefcase shut and walked away without another glance. Alone in the echoing hallway, Thomas felt a presence beside him. Lily. Her face was no longer a mask of pity or coldness. It was simply tired and utterly real. "You see, Thomas," she said, her voice quiet, "I didn't have to convince anyone you were crazy. I didn't even need the best lies. I just had to show them who you really were, and who you were was enough to destroy you all by itself." She turned and walked away, her heels clicking softly on the marble floor. The sound faded, leaving him in the silent hall with the wreckage of his life. Lily stepped out into the sunlight. The victory was complete. It didn't taste sweet. It tasted of dust and old whiskey and a decade of wasted years. She had won. Not with her darkest conspiracy, but with his darkest truth. The old house sold quickly. The furniture, the memories, the heavy silence, all of it was gone. With the proceeds from that sale and the court-mandated transfer of stocks, Lily was left with a number in her bank account so large it felt abstract. She used it to buy light. A penthouse on the top floor of a new glass tower, with walls of windows that showed the entire city glittering like a spilled jewel box. On her first night there, she opened a bottle of champagne. The pop was bright and happy. She poured 2 glasses, one for her, one for her friend Sophia. The sound of classical music filled the airy space, mixing with their easy laughter. There was no tension here, no fear of a footstep in the hall. She had everything. Money, freedom, the quiet respect of her peers who saw only a strong, long-suffering survivor. but one debt remained unpaid. Thomas, in his small, dingy apartment, was still remembered by the world as a pitiable victim of a terrible illness, a tragic figure. That narrative didn't settle Lily's final account. She needed to correct the record. 6 months later, a book appeared in stores. The cover showed a soft focus photograph of a woman's hands holding a man's. The title, By His Side, The Silent Years. The author was listed as The Quiet Wife. It was a memoir, a heart-wrenching, beautiful story of a devoted woman caring for her brilliant husband as he descended into the ravages of a severe, paranoid mental illness. It spoke of her sacrifices, her sleepless nights, her unwavering love in the face of his confusing rage and terrifying hallucinations. It was a masterpiece of selective truth. The book became a bestseller overnight. Lily, revealed as the author, was invited onto a national morning talk show. She wore a simple, elegant, cream-colored suit. Her hair was perfect. She looked like grace personified. The host, her voice thick with sympathy, asked, "Lily, what gave you the strength to go through all that for so many years?" Lily looked into the camera, her eyes shimmering with practiced tears. "Love," she said, her voice soft but clear. "Just love. And maybe a little bit of fear. Fear that if I fell apart, there would be no one left to protect him from the world and from the terrifying visions inside his own mind." She paused, a delicate, heartbreaking pause. Even when he would look at me and call me by another woman's name, I just held his hand tighter. The studio audience sighed. Viewers at home reached for tissues. Lily's image was cemented. The saintly, long-suffering heroine. Her social capital reached its peak. Amid the whirlwind, an old face reappeared. Michael, a friend from her college days, now the head of a successful media conglomerate. He sent flowers to her publisher, then asked her to dinner. Over wine at a rooftop restaurant, he looked at her with genuine admiration. "I read your book," he said. "It's extraordinary. You're extraordinary. You make me see women in their prime aren't just beautiful. They're the real treasure. Intelligent, deep, and unbelievably brave." Lily smiled, a real one this time, feeling the warm glow of the city lights and his sincere attention. It was a new kind of validation, sweet and uncomplicated. In a small, dim apartment across town, Thomas sat on a second-hand sofa. The room smelled of old takeout and dust. He clicked on the small television, flipping channels aimlessly. He stopped. There she was. Lily, glowing under studio lights, smiling graciously as a host gushed over her. The chyron at the bottom of the screen read, "Best-selling author and caregiver, heroine Lily Finch." The host asked the question about strength. Thomas leaned forward, his heart a cold stone in his chest. He watched Lily's face, saw the calculated shimmer in her eyes, heard the perfect tremor in her voice as she spoke of love and fear and protecting him from the terrifying visions inside his own mind. A white-hot rage, so pure it was dizzying, exploded behind his eyes. With a strangled cry, he snatched up the remote and hurled it at the screen. The TV went black with a final thump. He buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking. A knock at the door made him jump. He opened it to find the son of an old colleague, a man in his 30s he hadn't seen in years. The young man looked uncomfortable, but earnest. He held a copy of Lily's book. "Mr. Finch, I, I thought you should have this," the man said, thrusting the book into Thomas's hands. "My mom gave it to me. After reading it, I get it now. I understand why everyone admires Mrs. Finch so much. You're really lucky to have had her." He gave an awkward, sympathetic nod and quickly walked away. Thomas stood in the doorway, holding the book. The cover felt toxic. He carried it back to his sofa like it was a live bomb. He opened it. The dedication page read, "For all the silent caregivers, your love is the quietest, strongest force on earth." He flipped to a random chapter. It described a scene. Him, confused, begging for his long-dead mother. A scene she had fabricated in her notebook months ago, now polished into poignant, best-selling prose. It was her truth. It had become the only truth the world would ever know. A sound ripped from his throat, part sob, part roar. He grabbed the book with both hands and tore it in half. The spine cracked. He kept tearing, shredding the pages, scattering the lies around him like confetti at his own funeral. He collapsed onto the floor amidst the paper scraps, his body racked with silent, heaving sobs of absolute, final despair. From the shattered television, now just a dark mirror, no sound came. But in his mind, he could still hear it, echoing from the penthouse in the sky and from every bookstore and every sympathetic heart in the city, the sound of Lily's triumphant, gracious laughter. The hallways of the Lavender Meadows Assisted Living Center were too quiet. The sound of a distant television played a decades-old sitcom laugh track. A cleaning cart rattled somewhere. A resident coughed, a dry, lonely sound. It was a nice place, clean and safe, but it felt miles away from the world. After a severe depressive episode where Thomas had stopped eating and caring for himself entirely, this had become his new, final address. It was the last, elegant box in Lily's long-term plan. She had come for one last visit, not out of pity, to show him, in the clearest terms possible, the difference between the winner and the loser, and to say the words she had carried for 20 years. She pushed open the door to his room. He sat in a chair by the window, dressed in soft, gray patient clothes, staring at nothing. He looked diminished, like a plant left in a dark corner. Lily stood in the doorway for a moment, a vivid splash of color against the beige room. She wore a dress of deep, victorious red. Her hair shone. She was aflame in a room of ash. Thomas slowly turned his head. His eyes, dull and tired, focused on her. There was no anger left, just a hollow recognition. Lily walked in and sat in the chair opposite him without a word. She placed her expensive leather handbag on the floor. From it, she carefully withdrew a small, perfect cupcake in a clear box. It had one candle on it, shaped like the number 51. She lit the candle with a match, the tiny flame reflecting in her calm eyes. She leaned forward, blew it out with a soft puff, and then proceeded to remove the cupcake, peel back the liner, and take a deliberate, savoring bite. "My birthday this year was lovely," she said, brushing a crumb from her lip. She ate the cupcake slowly, in silence, while he watched. When she was done, she wiped her fingers on a napkin. Then she began to talk. Her voice was even, conversational, as if recounting a mildly interesting documentary she'd seen. "It started with the bakery, you know," she said. "Carol has the biggest mouth in 3 counties. I just gave her the right thing to say." She told him about the motel, about the staged doctor's appointment with the actor she'd hired, how she'd studied the psychiatric terms to make it sound right. She described the party, the careful whisper about snakes in his glass, the social pressure she'd orchestrated. She mentioned Elena and the fake social worker who'd scared her away for the price of a plane ticket. She even admitted to the video in the ruined study, how she'd baited him into giving her that perfect final clip. To prove it, she took out her phone. She tapped the screen and turned it to him. It was a short, cheerful video. The man who had played Dr. Raymond and the man who had been Mr. Daniels were sitting with Lily at a bar, all of them laughing. They raised their glasses to the camera. "To a perfect performance," one of them said, grinning. Thomas stared at the screen, then back at her face. The sheer, casual audacity of it was a new kind of blow. Finally, a sound came from him. A dry, rasping whisper, forced from a throat that hadn't used words in days. "Why?" he croaked. "Just because I cheated?" Lily smiled a little, a private, cool smile. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the manicured gardens below. "No," she said, her back to him. "Because for 20 years you saw me as furniture, a quiet, useful shadow, a servant who didn't have a mind of her own. You thought I was stupid, docile. The affair was just the last drop. It gave me the excuse to show you exactly what the woman you looked down on could do. How easily she could turn you into the thing that gets stored away." She turned back to face him. From her bag, she took one more item, a thick, bound manuscript. She placed it on the small table beside his chair. The title page read, "The Art of Survival and Thriving After 50. "Here," she said. "A gift. Read it, so you can understand exactly what you lost." She didn't wait for a response. She picked up her bag, turned, and walked out of the room. The door closed behind her with a soft, final click. Thomas didn't watch her go. His eyes were fixed on the manuscript. After a long minute, he reached a trembling hand and turned to the first page. There was a dedication, written in elegant, familiar handwriting. "For Thomas, the greatest teacher of my life. Thanks to you, I finally learned the lesson. Never underestimate the intelligence and patience of a woman. Signed, Lily, the victor." From the hallway, he heard the brisk, confident tap of her high heels fading away. They were soon swallowed by the upbeat, pulsing beat of a pop song from her phone's speaker, a soundtrack to her triumphant exit. Then, nothing. Only the oppressive quiet of the home and the sound of his own labored, ragged breathing in the empty room. The story of the pitiful, unlucky wife was over. No, it would be more accurate to say the story of the new queen of her own life had just begun.
What do you think about this story? I think the most chilling revenge is not the crime, but the perfectly staged performance. Lily won by letting Thomas own lies, and the words pity become the bars of his cage. She proved that true power lies in the patience, intelligence, and letting your enemy's true nature destroy him. Thank you for your listening. Subscribe for more stories like this.